All right. Let's see if Telle remembers this time to join. There he is. First one. No car problem this time.
Nope. $1,000 later.
Dude, cars are like the best and the worst thing.
Yeah, it's. I'm trying to like prop this. I have this like stand thing, but yeah. I mean, they're like the best and worst thing. I need it, but I hate having to deal with it.
Absolutely. So, how have you been this past week? What fun things other than car issues have you been to?
Not too much. Had like a pretty relaxing weekend. Basically just played basketball. I think Sunday morning with our old bass player and just like hung out with him for a bit, and then cooked and relaxed at the house. I haven't done really anything this weekend, and obviously the last week was kind of stressful and shitty, but overall, just chilling and trying to be productive as much as one can.
Yeah, no, I hear that. You mess around and get a triple double?
Well, we played one-on-one, so I would say I definitely had a double-double. But I guess if you count the times where I missed and got my own rebound, that can count as an assist. So I probably came close.
No, it was funny actually as we were getting ready to do this, I saw that J.R. Smith, I guess, is getting picked up by the Lakers.
Yep. I feel like it was inevitable. He's been waiting for LeBron probably to just hit him up and be like, "All right, let's go, bro."
Dude, I have such a love hate with him. Even in like 2K, I always grab J.R. Smith because like if he's on,
Yeah.
holy shit, it's the best ever to have him on your team. But when that motherfucker goes old, Jesus, it's like he's in the fucking Arctic, man. That dude,
Him and Jamal Crawford have always been like that, where it's just if it's hot, it's really hot, and if it's cold, it's can't make anything.
dude, my three off the bench, just because I was playing the law of averages with it, was Kyle Korver, J.R. Smith, and J.J. Redick. Figured at
I
some
mean,
point, either one of them three light it up, but if you get two or three of them all going, ooh, that's like a death line.
oh yeah, yeah,
I don't,
some of the greatest shooters of all time.
do you play too much 2K or like are you much video games?
I'm more of a Madden guy. I play a lot of Madden. I mean, I do play 2K from time to time, but I haven't got into. I like the franchise mode, like in video games or sports games, I guess. And so Madden just it's there's just more players and more that you have to do to like maintain a team. So and I would say like as far as like playing games, I like football more. If it's in person, like I play basketball all the time, so I love basketball. But 2K is definitely on the B side of my video game playing. Right now, I'm pretty much only playing Madden, Call of Duty, and that's it. That's literally it.
Yeah, I have Last of Us 2, but I haven't dipped into it because I've been in a small house and
The Last of Us is actually my favorite video game of all time. It's at least favorite storyline of all time, and so I'm waiting until I can really dive into that to play it, but not yet.
yeah, that was going to be what I just got hit with a lot of amazing opportunities of people say with podcasts. Jesse from Misery Signals and Jesse from Killswitch as of today, and those were 2 hour long. Holy shit! This is happening. Talk to people that I've here.
You were cutting out for a second. Is it do I look clear and can you hear me fine on your end? I can see that you said I can hear you fine, but I couldn't hear you. I don't know.
So should be good still. Hey, man.
I heard you that I hear you now. You look like very pigmented
Pixelated?
on pixelated, yeah,
Okay.
on my screen. But Jesse from Killswitch is awesome. I did hear that much. He's a great dude. We've had some really amazing talks on tour and played a lot of shows. So I mean, he's just a very great guy. Very like well-intentioned, deeply feeling human being. So he's one of my favorites that I've toured with.
So I was thinking, as of when we were going to do this last week, you were, I think, the second to last person that you at a show. And I think you guys wrapped up that tour within a week or so after our show.
March 3rd ended up being the last date of the tour. March 4th was supposed to be the last show, ended up getting canceled. Pretty much half of the Falling in Reverse camp was sick, including their drummer who had food poisoning actually, so he couldn't play, and it was just like the last day, so they called it, and we went home from there. So March 3rd was our last one. I'm not sure when the date of ours was, so I don't know. Like when I'm on tour, like I know that we played and I remember talking, but I have no recollection of like where in the tour that date was.
See, the hard part for me that I was trying to was it seemed like, and I'm sort of in the same thing that you're in, where it's like I went to that show, but then I had so much other like podcasting shit to do, interviews to prepare for, that even I forget how long it was in either direction. But I feel like it was like a week and a half later, not even, that your trailer got built.
Yeah, it was the night before the last show. So technically it happened the night after the last show, on March 3rd into the early hours of March 4th. And we were at an Airbnb, and we were like in a nice part of Sacramento. We thought, we would be safer there. And I can't remember, it might have been Zach went out and was going to just grab his backpack or something and noticed a bunch of glass and a huge portion of the window of our Sprinter. And since it was the end of the tour, we had so much stuff that would never have been in there. Like, we're really smart on tour. We try to take care of everything we can. And but it was because we were going to be going home. We put a bunch of stuff in because we're like, oh, we don't want to load it in the morning. And so we were like, everyone's getting ready to take their individual stuff home. And they got us for about $10,000 worth of stuff and damage. And we were in like a weird gray area with the rental, with some of the property. And so our renter's insurance didn't cover anything. And we were in the middle of seeking a new policy, which right now is on pause because who knows when we're going to tour again right now. But it was literally like, if we would have just made it through that, we would have been totally fine. And so it's very frustrating, and obviously it sucks to have had, all that stuff stolen. Some of it was irreplaceable. A lot of it was personal things. But some of it were things that ultimately, as much as it sucks to have stolen, it doesn't matter, whether it's like clothes or jewelry or things like that. So it's just unfortunate because this is the third time we've been robbed in 3 years, and we got robbed twice in 1 week, where we had a bunch of gear stolen, merchandise, and they just snapped the back of the trailer, like the entire like steel beam piece was gone. So I mean, they like really knew what they were doing because we had it as safe as you can have it. But unfortunately, musicians are a huge target on tour for people. They know all they have to do is look on Google who's coming in town. They look up where maybe your socials, where you're staying, and a lot of people target bands, and it's so shitty. And but it's just unfortunately part of the territory that we have to deal with. It's one of the things that makes touring really stressful at times. Is a lot of the cities you play are not in the best area, like the venues are not in the best areas. So some of those times you have to have someone like watching at all times, and maybe you have to pay someone extra, or you have to hire extra security. There have been venues that the security guards are in on it, so they let people know, and then trying to prove that is next to impossible. And so yeah, touring is not always fun, but when you're not getting robbed, it's a lot better.
I guess something I've never really thought of is, I was just going to ask you, do you feel like there are rings dedicated solely to figuring out the touring industry and who's coming where and potentially what they have? But
I'm sure I know that in St. Louis, in Oakland, and in Montreal, there have been 3 that I've known of since I've toured the last 13 years, that were very intentional, like groups that were targeting bands touring.
just kind of wild that I don't know. I always think like when there's stuff like that that's going on, I'm always like, would never think to do that. But
You're probably not a bad person.
I
And
don't think so. But
it's unfortunate because people targeting artists in particular, it's like, one, they're never going to be the ones that have the most money. But we have valuable property, and I think a lot of people assume, especially today, that musicians are very wealthy and have all this money because they have all these expensive equipment, or clothing or whatever. But it's like a lot of people, it's like they're bringing their nicest clothes for tours so they can look like a halfway decent human being on stage. And then gear, a lot of it is accumulated over years and years of hard work, saving up to buying things. Our guitarist Tony one time had a guitar stolen that was the first really, really nice guitar he bought. It was a Gibson Les Paul. It was very meaningful to him, and it got stolen, and not actually on tour, which kind of made it even more heartbreaking. But it's just like when people steal from musicians, it's like we're trying to give art so that the world can make more sense and be a more enjoyable place to navigate. And so stealing from bands, I think, is pretty low. Not that stealing from anyone is any better necessarily, but there's a special place in hell for people who steal from musicians, that's for sure.
I feel like someone I've never heard of getting stolen from is Andy WK, and maybe look like a trashy bum yourself. Just
Well, he also flies in a lot of places, and probably has things delivered. I remember we did a Warped Tour. I can't remember if he was on when I was in the Word Alive and on Warped Tour, or if he did it when I was in Greeley Estates, or maybe both. Who knows? But basically, he was almost never seen, and he would just show up, and he was wearing all white, and it was just dirty, and it didn't matter. And his whole thing, like, party hard, like he didn't party like at all. He had like one night maybe he hung out at like a barbecue or something, but for the most part he doesn't hang out really. And
I have it on good authority. I won't say who my source is. That dude used to party, really, really, really party to the point
I'm
of
sure.
almost having it be a huge problem, internationally and so forth, to kind of catch my drift. And that he himself started toning it back because it was getting him into a lot of shit.
I can see that. I mean, the early 2000s, when he was blowing up, I think around like 2004, 2005, 2006, like when he like really, really blew up. That was before I started touring, obviously, but I am assuming that he had to have lived up to his, um, mystique and everything to a certain degree. But um, yeah, he was pretty tame by the time I think it was between 2008 and 11 when we were on tour with him.
I think it's funny. I've been thinking a lot about Warped Tour stuff because I think I've been seeing a lot of memories of band time hop myself and so forth of seeing a lot of Warped Tour memories going through. And so I've really been kind of thinking about now that it's done, just thinking about like all the years that I went, like some crazy things I saw and had heard. Like I remember going to, I want to say it was, '06. It was an ETID year because I always pretty much won every year that ETID was on, and they were almost every other year. And I know the Big Dirty was getting out, and they were on a stage, and I went to go see uh, that band, um, tech band, rock band with Roddy, um, the Protest the Hero. I went to go see,
Canadian boys.
and I went to go see them, and I think it was Forever the Sickest Kids or some band like that. And all those dudes were doing was just bitching the whole fucking time. They're on one of those like side stages, going like, "Not used to like playing in front of this little of a crowd or this small of a stage and this, that, and the other," and just bitching and bitching and bitching. And Roddy came on. He's like, "We don't give a fuck what side of the stage we're on. We don't care how big it is. We don't care how many people we're playing in front of. Let's have some fun." And just tore it up. And
Yeah.
I was like, it's so great that sort of bands will talk shit on other bands on the stage that they're on. At least they kind of do. Even thinking back to when Katy Perry was on it, I think that same year actually.
2008. I was on that tour.
Okay. And I remember hearing people on the tour, someone be like, "Oh, I just had to hold Katy Perry's purse so she could go do some blow in the bathroom."
I smoked weed with Katy Perry in 2008. And I think it was the first time she had ever smoked weed was on Warped Tour in 2008. And
Sure.
she was dating Travie McCoy, and she was actually really sweet. She was really nice. She hung out. She probably hung out way more than he did actually. And I think she was just trying to like embrace the community and like the time, but it was crazy. I mean, from the beginning of the tour till the end, like it was insane. Like watching her literally blow up before everyone's eyes was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was kind of weird looking back on that tour because I mean, like you had Fred from at the time he had just left Taking Back Sunday, and I think he was color Fred.
Yeah,
Chiodos,
they were on the same stage as us that year.
okay, and then I remember As Lay Dying headlined the night in Detroit that I went to. It was their last night. Chiodos randomly popped out. Craig ran into me like some tattoo I had at the time, and then like a few days after that, like posted this thing on MySpace about how he's going to kill himself or whatever. Then that got taken out, and then Chiodos was basically for a while after that. There's just like really weird stories, kind of like that I remember from like that specific year, where it was just like, oh, As Lay Dying was like super big, and to be able to like look behind you and see basically the entire Warped Tour, watching them, it was like, wow, there's like I knew
They had
there was something like that just changed right there for that band and their trajectory on that tour.
they had massive crowds every day. We were all friends, and still are, but that was an insane tour for them. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen gnarlier like pits ever than As I Lay Dying in 2008. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was so weird. Like kind of looking back on some of those tours, I feel like that was kind of the era where, especially because I think that year Ozfest was free, so you saw a lot more of the Ozfest bands pop to Warped Tour, and I think it might have been either right before or the year after Mayhem Fest started, so you started seeing more cross genres on Warped Tour. But I remember even back then in 2008, like I felt like I was too old to be there as like a 22 or a 20.
I was I think I just turned 21. Or I turned 21 the summer before. I turned 22 on Warped Tour in 08.
What are some of your memories of Warped Tour?
Man, I mean, I feel like it's like millions. Um,
Can you
I feel
actually?
like I probably a lot. Usually, like when we're talking about stuff, someone will say something, be like, "Oh, do you remember when?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah," and then like a flood of memories come rushing back. I mean, but in general, Warp Tour is a very special thing. Like, everyone refers to it as like punk rock summer camp, and it literally is. You make so many new friends. I have friends. So 2008 was the first year that I ever went because I swore to myself that I would never go until I was playing, and which I did. Um, but then once I was on, like I started making friends, and I have a lot of those friends still to this day, and I will for the rest of my life. There's something to be said about those days of Warp Tour in particular. Like, I think the friendships that we all built, were very real, and there wasn't a lot of, you know, every man for himself mentality. There's my boy Dan Dobie in there. I will quickly shout out him. Side note, go to Dan Dobie's page after this. He has a short film that is absolutely incredible. It's very beautiful and it has a twist that is really great. So, side note, amazing guy, director, writer. He just does it all. So, check that out after. But Warp Tour is really a place where I think it made or broke a lot of bands, and it made a lot of the bands in our scene. From A Day to Remember, bands like Chiodos, obviously to The Word Alive, our friends We Came as Romans, Miss May I. There's just like so many of us that really grew as musicians and friends, as entrepreneurs within the music industry. I think Warp Tour taught us another level of hustling that has helped a lot of us grow and understand that there are changes in the industry every single year, and you kind of have to adapt to it. So I love it.
I think one of the crazier things and was really cool from my perspective of having put on shows for like years before was seeing the second to last. My friend Frank was on it, tour managing for CKY. Um, we ended up getting my wife and I got one of those like all access, no escort needed
No, I
thing,
swear. Yeah.
and a lot of people, and I saw this all day. A lot of people were just kind of like taking the selfie, all this kind of shit, and it was just about being able to be somewhere that people couldn't get to. The
Yeah.
thing that impressed me the most about it was seeing, especially on like the main stage, or one of the main stages, I should, where it was like the amphitheater, and it was cut in half for each of the
Hmm.
stages. See how fast they were able to tear one down, get the other band going, set up the next one, sound check, and as soon as that 25, 30 minutes was done, next band is literally ready to go. I have
Yeah.
never, like, I was so enthralled and just fascinated by watching true professionals work in such a chaotic environment. And to me, that was like one of the biggest takeaways of that whole experience, seeing the real pro of pros working. Because I think that's a tour where the week get cut out and discovered real fast.
Yeah, I mean, it is really hard work. All of our crew, any crew of Warp Tour itself, the stage managers, the hands. I mean, it's fucking grueling. It is not easy. And a lot of the thing is with like the way the schedule was, like, a lot of bands and crew and people, you're up late and you're up early, and you get like 6 hours or less of sleep almost every single day and back in the day. Warp Tour is 7.5 weeks long. Like that's a long time, and you're outside every single day. So it takes a special kind of person. You have to will yourself to be, getting up every day, and bands like us that would walk the lines before doors would open and try to get people to come see us when we were first starting, doing 2, 3, 4 hour long signings and things like the turnover of the stages. It is a very precision based, tour. Like if one band and their crew are slacking off, it hurts everyone. And so it really teaches you responsibility. And there are a lot of bands that didn't give a shit, and a lot of those bands broke up, because like they weren't really respected, they weren't wanted, and it seemed like their egos got the best of them, and a lot of those bands, just aren't around. I think that was one of the good things about Warped Tour is it wasn't really a place for ego, although that did exist. For the most part, everyone was going to catering, everyone is enduring the heat to some degree in a very similar way. Obviously, there are the upper echelon bands that were having people do everything for them that didn't have that, but most likely those bands were at that point at some point and worked their way up. So it's definitely a great tour that I loved being on every single year. We were never that band that complained about the heat, about playing first or last or in between. It didn't matter really to us. We just, we're thankful we got to play for new fans every day and hopefully have a good time with our friends afterwards.
Yeah, it was kind of weird that last year that I went, I didn't really see a whole lot of bands hanging out. And it was kind of weird. Like the second to last year that I went, it was full of like a lot of legacy acts and then kind of bands in between. It didn't have like those really heavy hitting headliners that a lot of the years before it had. I mean, I loved it because it had like Acacia Strain, Amir, Telle. Not that it's not really like a band that I'm in love with, but great fun band to watch. Candiria was on it, and I remember being real stoked to see Hundreth because at that point they had just kind of changed their.
They switched from being a hardcore band to
like a
whatever, whatever they are, which I like way more of personally.
Yeah. That was like one of the only bands we actually decided to get on the backstage thing and check them out from stage. It was really weird because like I really admired them for just being like, we're not telling the label that we're not going to be what we have been the entire time of our career, and we're just putting this, which I think kind of really fucked them because they were like, at least if they would have said something to somebody, they probably wouldn't have been on the two stages that were like the quote unquote heaviest bands on the tour. So it's like here, you got Hatebreed, and then it's like, okay, here comes some like post indie shoegaze kind of stuff. And it was really cool for me to see it, but I could just see from their perspective, like people, I don't know if they even knew that they had changed their style since the last time they had seen them. And you just saw a lot of bum faces.
Yeah, I mean, on that tour every day, the singer would be like, raise your hand if you thought that our band was going to sound completely different than this.
Yeah.
And, obviously a lot of people were like raising their hand. But I mean, I give them credit. I think it was ballsy to do that. And I really like that band. So I give them props for just showing up. They knew what they were doing though. There were more people talking about Hundreth because they played those stages, I think, than they would had they not. And I think they knew that was going to happen. So they might not have liked it in the moment, but they definitely talked about them, and I bet you they made more fans than they lost that summer.
Yeah, it was just kind of interesting. You don't really see a whole lot of bands taking, I don't know if big risks is the word I want to use, but I just don't feel like you see bands taking risks like that on something that's kind of feel like a sure thing. Like if you're on Warped Tour and you're of a certain caliber, like that's kind of like a bread and butter tour for you, kind of maybe set you up for something pre or post the tour. So to come out with something so different and not really have anyone know until it's kind of like, okay, I don't know if I want to go see them now. I don't know how I feel about this record. I immediately loved it. I was just kind of like, how are they going to pull a lot of these textures off?
Well, that's why they did it, though. They wanted that extreme, shift. They wanted people to be like, you're with us or against us, but you're going to be talking about them. And, they could have done this huge, elaborate marketing thing and, like, been, like, teasing the shift. I love that they just ripped the Band-Aid off. I think it's way cooler. I think they did it like the most punk rock way you can do what they did. They were just like, no, we're not that anymore. This is what we are. And if you like it, cool. If you don't, that's cool too.
I just kind of wonder, I was supposed to talk to Chadwick a while ago and then just kind of fell through because they're getting ready to do a European run, I think. But it was one of those things for me, like, where I'm like, okay, so like I know the label spin this however you want. I don't know if the label dropped them. They decided they didn't want to be on the label, but I know they're not on the label that they were on. So I'm almost like, did it really pay off to do it the way you did? Do you? Because I just want to like ask someone who like took the big ballsy risk like that and
Yeah.
be like, did it actually pay off? Or looking back in hindsight now, do you wish you wouldn't have been so gung ho to prove everyone wrong and maybe made smarter decisions along the way that could have benefited your career a little bit longer within the infrastructure of a label like that?
You know, the what if game is a very hard game to play, especially with music. And um, I'm trying to think of a band that has maybe not gone as far with their sound, but I mean, a huge band, the 1975 is a good example, right now, where they can do a song like People, and it's literally like a thrash punk band, and then they can have like somebody else, and it works. And I think what that proves is that as long as it's just genuine and authentic, and it's what you really believe in and want to do, like, not every song has to be for every person that's ever heard of your band. Um, and you don't owe anybody anything when it comes to creation. So for me, like when I had never listened to a full song probably by them until that record. And when I heard that they did that, I was like, that's sick. And I checked it out and I was like, oh, like I like this band now. And I have listened to it a bunch over the years. I couldn't like tell you a song title or my favorite song, but that's because overall I really do listen to like the opposite of like anything from our scene. Um, and part of that is just like I like to have a break from it, and then the other part is I really want to try to draw any inspiration, whether it's subconscious or not, from something outside of what everyone else is doing in our scene of music. And that could go from the lightest band to the heaviest band. And I enjoy nostalgia, like, a lot of people, when you fall in love with a band for one record, and if they shift what you think is a lot. I mean, Underoath, I guess, is another great example. Underoath was like a death metal, like super heavy band, and then they dropped They're Only Chasing Safety, which to a lot of those fans was a pop record, which it definitely wasn't a pop record. It was very hook laden. It was very melodic and upbeat, but anytime you aren't playing breakdowns and stuff all the time and screaming really low, they just call it pop. And I think Underoath going to They're Only Chasing Safety is what like brought that into the scene. And it was just like, oh, if you shift your style and you soften it all, you're just a pop band now.
Right. No, I think something that I've kind of been wondering too, in light of a lot of the things that are currently happening in the scene, I guess I'll say, is I'm wondering if a lot of the allegations, I'll just call them that for now, that we're seeing just spread right now, if that really was sort of what was causing Warped Tour to go down.
I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think it was purely financial. It was decision making with what bands were playing, how much money was going towards sponsorships. I think, Kevin has admitted that if he could go back, he would have never had like the YouTubers take up a portion of Warped. Like, there are a lot of things. Some bands just, outgrew Warped and they didn't want to do it for what would be an affordable price for Kevin to put on, the festival. And so I think the talent pool went, lower and lower, and he was trying to like find that diamond in the rough. Because I mean, ultimately, let's just be honest on that subject. It's kind of like that in any form of entertainment, comedy, acting, and part of that, I think, is, you have a lot of people who come from broken homes, aren't as educated. Some people don't have the best examples. A lot of people are coming from fatherless homes or abusive families, relationships, so many things, and they're finding their home in music, and then all of a sudden maybe they have, money and fame, and they have tens of thousands of people, if not millions of people, adoring them and putting them on this pedestal. And then you have people who, whether they're younger or under the influence or just caught up in the moment, that, yeah, it's easy to look back, and be like, whoa, like some of us were ignorant or shitty, or, we said things we shouldn't have said. But I really think for the most part, it is not like there are a bunch of predators and, sick people running around like Warp Tour and stuff. It's not like that. There's a handful of a couple people, but you're talking about out of thousands and thousands of artists. It seems bigger because I think social media puts a magnifying glass on a lot of things, but definitely anything negative or controversial. And there's not really, I can't say that I'm not for cancel culture to a certain extent, but there's not really any education in it. And I think, part of the problem with Warp Tour was a lot of people, are just thrown into the wolves. It is a really hard tour, and there is a lot of, you're only playing 30 minutes out of the day technically, and maybe your day ends at 11:30, in the morning. And so I think that tour in particular got a lot of shit, but it's because it was in the summertime. A lot of people weren't at work or school, college, whatever, it may be. And you're talking about a bunch of quote unquote rock stars that are off the clock no later than 6 p.m. and with an unlimited amount of alcohol. And well, I mean, almost every tour has a little, drug use or what have you. And it doesn't mean that there's a bunch of drug addicts like in the music scene either. There are, but no more than everyday life. It's just these people have access to things that are, it's just easier. And I think when things are easier for people, they don't really think about the consequences as much because they didn't really have to go through the effort, and have that feeling of like, maybe I shouldn't do this because it's just there. And no one really teaches that, when you're growing up, and everyone can say like, well, you should know, when you're 21 and you're never had much discipline your whole life, and then you're thrown into this situation where everything you see around you, it becomes desensitized, and you think certain things are normal that aren't. You can look back years later once you've grown up more and be like, man, like some of those things weren't necessarily the best situations, or I wish I hadn't seen that or done that. But I think Warp Tour gets a bad rap. At the end of the day, Kevin Lyman is one man. His job is to put on a festival. It isn't to babysit or be the Warp Tour dad or police, for that matter. And I think that a lot of people don't give him enough credit for what he was able to build, and instead they focus on these negative stories and the negative energy that comes out. But I do think people need to be educated and learn, and it's good to talk about it, and it's good that these things are coming out so that we can learn from it and grow from it as an entire community. But I think if the first thing is just to try to like throw every person or everyone or every tour that's been associated with something under the bus, I don't think that's fair or helpful to the growth of the scene. And ultimately, the scene is supposed to be for those kinds of people that have, a hard time, that need to connect deeper with the music that they're listening to, that these songs are written about stories that they relate to. And I think ultimately it's a necessary part for this scene to elevate from what it's been. It's like anything in history. There's no, civilization that like is just on top forever. I think the scene grew, and it was this place that was standing up against a lot of things. But then because humanity as a whole, there are good people and there are bad people, and eventually certain bad people will be in positions of power, and then they have choices they can make, and they're not going to make the right choice. And then once you do that and they set the standard, then it lowers, kind of that benchmark that everyone's like trying to reach as far as, their character and moralistic, balance in their life goes. So we're just in a reset mode to a certain extent where I think we're taking one step backwards so that hopefully we can take five forward. Because let's be honest, in different scenes of music, hip hop, rap, which we all love in my band and listen to all the time. When I grew up on it in the 90s, a lot of it was very relevant to what was happening in the world, that was very relevant to what was happening in people's communities. And now you see a lot of music videos are exclusively about sexualizing the opposite sex, about misogynistic mentalities, that if you don't have a bunch of earthly things, that you're not doing well, and it doesn't necessarily set the best example. And so I think like our generation is just hitting that wall that we all need to like look in the mirror and look around and see how our scenes of music can try to grow from where they're at right now. And I think there are artists in all genres of music that could do better. And so we all should. And so hopefully we'll see growth from all of this. I can't imagine that it could sustain itself trying to tear apart everyone and every community and everything. I think the best approach is to educate, to try to use these examples, so that whether you're 14, 15, 16 years old coming to a show, you can come and feel safe, but also know the red flags to look out for. And then when we're on tour, we need to do a better job, those of us who are trying to make it a safe place, to make sure we're keeping an eye out on things, and promoters are keeping an eye out on things, venue owners are keeping an eye out for things, managers are checking in on their bands, labels are checking in on their bands. There's so much responsibility that falls on so many shoulders that to pinpoint it on any one person, band, scene, it's impossible, and I think it does more harm than good.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, last week when I was waiting for you to join in, the whole Ghost Inside thing was the big story that had broke like that day or the day before. And I'm talking my way through how I felt about it, I feel a sense of hypocrisy as a person who, one person on the side of the argument basically loses everything and can never relearn. He has to lose everything to learn from his mistakes that he made years prior. However, the other person involved in it, who also said in my opinion, equally slanderous things, putting down another subculture of people, is, well, I changed. I'm not that person anymore. And it's like, well, how come you get to change in that same period of time, but this other person doesn't? And the only thing I kind of kept coming back to was, I, as a straight white man, don't know what it's like to be gay, trans, bi, anything like that. I don't know what it's like to be a person of color. And so I can only speak on just kind of working my way through it. But just logically, it would seem like if you're presented with just the facts of each story, it's like, okay, I said something derogatory about a set of people.
Mm-hmm.
I did it years ago. Same thing. I've learned from that. I did too. But you don't get to say that. Oh, okay. And I don't think you really changed. And then it's like, it just felt so weird to watch someone basically tear someone else down and watch them lose their whole career in their profession under the guise that they couldn't have possibly changed who they were in that amount of time, to then be the accuser basically going like, well, no, I did change. And it's still going, it still doesn't negate what the other person did. And it's like, I feel like we have so much of that going on in society beyond just those two instances, but just on a lot of levels, that it's like, when it's going through that, can't we kind of all step back and just kind of be like, wow, yeah, there's a little bit of hypocrisy there, and
Well, tearing down someone to build someone up, whether it's yourself or someone else, is almost never going to have the intended effect. And in that situation, look, I mean, I've toured with the Ghost Inside. Um, I was on tour and I had just broken my back, right, and I was riding on the bus with the Devil Wears Prada on our tour when I woke up and everyone was in the front lounge crying, and I was like, what happened? And they were like, the Ghost Inside. And I was like, I just knew something horrible happened. And then, when they told me what happened, I was so bummed. And seeing an entire community rise up, whether you were a pop music fan, hip whatever, like so many people came together to support that band and build them up. And what people don't, know is Jim, was a huge part of that band having an opportunity to come back. He was really like the life force behind their positive energy. And, I'm not going to say, I don't know what fully he said. I haven't asked him, and I haven't seen entirely. I can only assume it was something really, ignorant that he regrets deeply. And, for me, it's the same. Like, I am a straight white male, even though I'm not, rich by any means. Like, you have to recognize your privilege, in this world, and I do. That being said, I don't believe he is a racist, and I don't believe that that moment in time he was acting because he had hate for a person of color. I think if I mean I'll be honest, there are probably 90% of every tour I have done for the last 13 years, I have heard more than one white person, say what would be, considered a racist joke or slight or, whatever, what have you. Some people are just quoting Dave Chappelle, and so in my opinion, I think we all need to do a better job, of course, and recognize like, our past mistakes. But I mean, I agree. I think crucifying an individual because what he happened to say is made public versus a huge percentage of people who, if their worst, say we all have the worst 10 things we've ever said in our lives broadcasted to the internet, I think a lot of people would be quiet right now, instead of trying to point the finger. And I know, not saying that particular thing, I've never called a person of color that word. I have definitely said things that would be considered ignorant or offensive, rude, thoughtless, and I've hurt people's feelings. I've lied. I've done. I'm a human being, and I think if everyone just took a step back and recognized the fact that at any given point, like, we all did or said things that aren't reflective of the person that we may be today, and we can look back, and then you become, like what people are talking about, like, then you become an ally towards personal growth. And things that I've done that are not, necessarily the best things, I can then use, and especially now that I'm older in the music scene, I get to talk to younger bands when we're on tour, and I get to share my perspective. And because I've said or done some of the things that I have, or seen some of the things I have a clear perspective on what they are going to probably likely feel or see in the future. Only now, from me sharing it, maybe they're learning that at 22, whereas I might have learned it at 25, whatever it was. And so I just think that there is a lot more room for compassion in the world as a whole. And when it comes to reckless things being said, I think there are active, hate-filled people that are actively right now problems for our communities, for schools, people who are in positions of power in government and education and what police, like that should be our collective focus. I don't think our energy should be wasted focusing on someone having a really, you know, horrible day and making a mistake. Obviously, there are some things I think, you go to jail or prison, whatever, you commit crimes, like that's a different story. But I think reckless words are things that some people will say or make statements that aren't indicative of the person they are, reflective of their heart and soul. And I think we need to do a better job of understanding context and understanding, like, some people, because of their privilege or their environment or other things, they're going to say or do things that they need the opportunity to understand why that's not right or good. And everyone can sit back and say, well, you should have done this or you should have known this. We all should have, known certain things that we've gone against in our life, and that's how you learn. And so I think that's where our energy needs to go. It needs to go towards active problems that are actively hurting, harming someone else intentionally, or just trying to be a better person and be compassionate towards people that just need to hear in a compassionate way, like, hey, like what you said, I don't really think that that's appropriate, and I think that this is why. Like having that conversation, while it might be uncomfortable and hard, is going to do way more good than fuck you, you're blocked, deleted, gone, whatever. Like I just don't see how big picture, long term, that's going to benefit society.
I think that's been something, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get to it with with Michael from Volumes, because they just dropped a new single, kind of talking about the detriment of social media and so forth. And actually, cheap plug for anyone who gives a shit about this. Tomorrow at like 12:30 Eastern, I'll be talking with Dan from Barry tomorrow, and we're going to kind of hit on something. It seems like everyone's kind of talking about what social media is doing in the world we live in. That's so focused around social media. And I know, going as far back as like the first year doing this podcast, something I was talking to Doc Coyle about in regards to the NBA, because there's always the debate who's better, LeBron, Michael, whoever, Kobe.
Yeah.
And he and I kind of, it's so different though that we can't even, it's not even necessarily like how the game was played back in the 80s, the 90s, now and so forth, but now throw on social media. So
Yeah.
right, we were talking about how LeBron probably has it the worst out of the three, because he has always been in the public eye, 24-hour news cycle, Sports Center, Twitter, all of these things. He always had that.
Since he was like 14 or 15 years old, it's been every day. I grew up in Ohio, and going to his games, like, I was a huge fan. And yeah, I mean, it was mayhem. Like, from the time he couldn't even drive a car yet, like, and I don't care who you are, like, nothing prepares you for that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not about giving people a pass, I think, which is a lot of the argument. It's like, no, it's like we just need to learn from it and teach so that we can do things better in the future. And obviously, media in general is going to run with the more drama-filled stories and negative stuff. A headline about, oh, firefighter rescues puppy is like a quick awe moment, but then you're looking for like the juicy, like things, and we perpetuate more negative things happening in the world because of that. We accent the bad things that are happening all the time, all day long, and then we wonder why people who feel like they're misfits or don't fit in, why they turn to making horrible things, all in the name of just being seen or feeling like people know who they are even. Right. There are so many societal problems right now that stem from focusing on negative thoughts, negative actions, and they say you make those people infamous, but infamy has become a positive thing in so many people's eyes, to where they would rather do something horrible. Um, Sometimes, people are sick, and sometimes people just do it because they feel like it's the best thing that they could possibly do with their life. And, um, it's like when you see, um, these things come out and school shooters and things like that. Why I think it's escalating is not because there's just so many more people that are born like with that way. It's like they're being taught hate. They're being taught that to be seen, you have to do something extreme or drastic. And if they don't feel like they're uber talented at something, or they feel left out, or they're told that they are never going to accomplish anything, that becomes like this weird stigma to where they're making choices where they're like, well, you said I wasn't going to amount to anything, and technically this is something. So, like it's like semantics, but like used against humanity. And it's such a weird thing. And it's crazy to me that in 2020, so many of these things are issues that we're fighting for equality in 2020, when you could use social media to see how a third world country lives, and just in 2 seconds, if you don't feel something like and want to be a part of something more positive, like it's just crazy. We could see how other cultures that are happier, healthier live, and we could be like, oh, they do this, they live longer, they're healthier, they mentally, physically, emotionally, all these things. This is a country that is raising, statistically smarter, young people and youth, people that are more empowered to change the world for the better. And then you don't do those things, and it's you're never going to create real change if we don't start learning from each other in different cultures. And to do that, you have to embrace equality.
Yeah, I know it's going to cut us off in about 2 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So there's so many things I have been like just talking through as best I can with people. I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever land on an answer, but I mean, there's just so many interesting facets to things that you're talking about that are interesting rabbit holes just to dissect and figure out how it applies, especially as you're older and you can remember a time before social media, when you remember when people actually communicated face to face, when you can remember when people weren't segregated by, like, I don't, like, real quickly, I was trying to figure out, when did people start going, fuck you because you are a liberal or a Democrat or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I don't remember growing up and having people be like, well, they're Democrats, I don't like them. Like, you may go like, I don't agree with them politically, but like, I don't remember where it happened to where like that became a thing that everyone now is just like, oh, you can't even with you.
I mean, it is social media. Social media is the reason that there is as much division in the world as there is. And you said they're not landing on an answer. I think that there is only one answer, and it is we all take responsibility to try to not put our energy towards fighting on the internet, fighting what can't be changed by one person per se, but rather trying to just wake up every day, be the best person you can possibly be, try to be positive, enjoy life, be thankful for life and the people that are around you. And that is the best thing that you can do. Obviously, along the ways, there's things where it's certain levels of activism, protesting, donating to charities, accenting and echoing voices of people who are far more eloquent and smarter than anyone we know. I think, doing all those things are great, but, I don't think that trying to just change the world every single day on the big spectrum is necessarily the best goal, because you're going to get burnt out. And I think just waking up every day, try to be the best you can be, and that's got to be good enough.
Well, I want to say thanks again for taking the time to chat. It was a lot of
Of
fun.
course.
I feel like it's so easy talking to you about a multitude of things, which is why I asked you to do this. Last time we did, same thing, just went kind of all over, and it was deep, real easy to talk with you, and sometimes that's not always easy to find. People that you're able to just connect with and talk about a multitude of things, not been out of shape one way or another about it. So I want to thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So people probably know where to find you and where to lie at this point. But thanks again. Stay safe, and hopefully all of this will clear up and see you guys again at some point.
Yep. Thank you, man.
Cheers.
Cheers.